Hey, so I believe we should be live and direct speaking to you here from. So I believe from London. So I'm going to mute. I think I've got my setup roughly correct in place. So let's just move this microphone a little bit. There we go, and hopefully you should be able to use the chat as well to communicate, just to give you a little bit of a feel of what's here behind the scenes here in London. I'm just beaming to you from just outside of London, coming to you through my C200 here, and I've got this kind of setup here, so please excuse me as I try my best to run this live stream with you literally live and direct. So the thing I guess that we're going to be chatting about today really is how we can take advantage of your video production skills, right? And craft things so that you can essentially earn a living from your skill set. We all dream of having a job and a role whereby we love what we do, and that is the thing that we get paid to do and get paid for. And I'm one of those lucky individuals that is living that dream. I am Simeon Quarry. I'm a Canon ambassador. Now, what that does mean is I'm not paid as an employee of Canon. I literally ended up using Canon. It was my camera of choice many years ago. The reason why I chose Canon, if I'm honest, is because I saw a Canon camera on the shelf, a video camera. It was called an XL1. It had a white lens and a really nice, beautiful red body where you when you open, it was where you add the tape. And I chose Canon purely because the camera looked good. I didn't realize that the reason that Canon created white lenses was because of heat transmission, and there was a technical reason behind it. But over the years, I ended up using Canon, and as a result was spotted by Canon. Probably the dream for many of you as well, right? Is creating work that an organization like Canon sees, recognizes, and then knocks on your door and says, hey, we would love to give you access to cameras before they come out, and love to get your inputs and your thoughts. So that's the life that I now lead. But today what we're going to do, we're going to start to go through some of my journey related to filmmaking, and we're going to touch on hopefully elements that will resonate with you, because my journey has moved from weddings. I was doing a lot of wedding filmmaking and videography, as well as utilizing photography. And then after a while, I managed to move from that to work with large organizations and corporations. And then now I work with large organizations, but instead of being that company or team that is hired to record and create a video, my production company and team now, well, we're almost like a tech startup. What we do now is we create the content that's interactive, uses video, uses 3D, and then we license it to organizations to use. It's a different business model from being paid for your time, which is what I used to, how I used to be paid. So let's see if we can dig into that. I am streaming to you live on YouTube, and what I hope is that you can use the chat box to interact with me. There is a very slight delay, but I'm going to test this now. I'm logged into not my main Simeon account, but one of my smaller accounts. But I'm going to say hi and welcome. And what would be great is if you could type back for me. That would be absolutely awesome. And in that way, I know that I'm not just talking to myself. And what I would also particularly love is if as we talk, would you mind asking me questions as well? If there's something that you really would like to know that will help you with your move into filmmaking or videography as a business, would you let me know, please, in the chat? I can see here now the first comments coming through. I am not alone. Yes, okay, that's really good. That is fantastic. What I would love in the chat as well, would you mind also just letting me know how I can help you today? I'd love to know if there's anything you're struggling with that we can start to tap into. And what you should know is, for those of you who are involved in this session, after this, there will be some of you will have access to a private meeting and we get to chat a lot more intimately as well. So it's fantastic to have you here. So when I started to get involved in wedding filmmaking, my aim was that I would want to do things differently. And I started off with more of a video camera, but moved to DSLR technology. The thing that I always end up doing is trying to look at the technology that's available to me and trying to work out how can I utilize maybe a change in technology. So I'll give you an example. When I started filmmaking with wedding videos, I realized that DSLRs were going to be a way of creating a really unique look. And so I decided to invest at a stage whereby I realized, well, do you know something? These other companies, maybe more experienced, maybe these bigger companies are running around with larger cameras. Now, what happens if I start to work with smaller cameras that have got a large sensor size? I started to tap into that and create a very different look and aesthetic. But the other thing that I did that really started to grow my business was I started to create behind the scenes videos. And what I wanted to do there is I wanted people to understand the work that was involved in what I was creating. So is that something that you could consider doing? I'm going to embarrass myself, and what I'm going to do is I am going to play just parts of videos to give you an insight into my world nearly 10 years ago, right? So when you look at the cameras, you will smile. But just take note, not just of the fact that, yes, I'm maybe very much slimmer and much smaller than I am now, but look what I'm doing. This video was created not just for me, it was essentially created for clients, so that clients would understand what life was like behind the camera, and so that they would start to understand the work that was involved and what we were aiming for. So I'll press play on this now, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
Good morning all, it's Simeon here from The Leader. We're on a shoot for Diana and Sandeep. We've got a full crew with us today, so we've got Toby, Mike, James, all of us are on today, and it's going to be a great day. We've got a big long day. We've been here since 6 in the morning. The time now is about 7:30, so we've just been gearing up, getting set up with everything. We have a really ambitious thing we've got to do today. We've got to do a same-day edit, so we're really excited about that. What we need to do is we need to film, but as we're recording and filming, we need to set up an edit station and actually create a short film that's going to be shown on some screens later on during the course of the reception. So let's see how that goes. We hope and pray that it's going to work out. I'm just getting a Steadicam set up. You might have seen one of these things before. You're probably thinking I'm dressed up like a man from the military, but there's some good reasons for it.
So what we would do is when we would film, I would actually have someone, bear in mind, this was in some ways before social media was even really a big thing. We would create these videos, we would put the time into and the budget into showing our process and how we do it. I wanted people to understand that these creations were not just something that fell into place. Sometimes the misconception can be when it comes to things like filmmaking and video, that it's all easy, right? And people are now used to doing TikToks, Instagram, and they may see a lot of what they do and are able to do in what we now do as professionals, but we need people to understand the difference. So in a way, what I'm starting to educate people on here is how I think. And that often is one of the most important things to charging for what you're doing.
Editing. That's hot. There we go. That's good as new. The white balance inside this room, I think, is about 2,700. Can we just check to make sure that that seems to work for everybody in all parts of the room? If not, just give some feedback and we'll make sure we're all on the same settings. Just crashed twice. Don't have time for crashing computers. It was actually a ceremony, a form of Hindu ceremony that we...
So this is us essentially creating a same-day edit and taking people on the journey behind the scenes with us as we create it, and as things go well and as things go wrong. The key thing here to take away is that the story behind the creation of the story was something that I accidentally tapped into without even realizing it. So as you start to create and you film, absolutely, you want to be concentrating on creating the best result possible for your customers, but what can you do to convey the work, the effort involved? Because this is one of the elements that creates a feeling. For me, the feeling I was trying to create essentially was for what we call prestige pricing. So when you price, I'm going to just move this, it's slipping, and you price for your work for video production, there's a few different ways of looking at the pricing, and because there are actually a few different pricing models. You're able to do things like price for your time, okay, which is where you end up having like an hourly rate, which is maybe something that maybe a lot of editors use if you're with editing, or maybe you charge because it's based on a day rate. You've got things like cost plus pricing. That's where you find out what the cost is to create and do something, and then you add on a margin. Maybe it's a 20% to 40%, a 60%, and that's how you create it. And then there's value-based pricing, which is where you try to create a perceived value, and that's what you end up trying to communicate, is what is that overall value, and that's how you price. And often what we do is we try to make a blend. One of the things I was trying to do here with my brand Vivida back then was create a prestige pricing. I wanted to create weddings, but what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to do the type of weddings whereby I wasn't in the right type of, the right type of venue where I could make a wedding look great. I wanted to work with enough crew and the right type of equipment, and that needed to be slightly higher paying jobs to allow me that flexibility to do the type of work that I wanted to do. So I couldn't sit at the bottom of the market in terms of pricing. I needed to find a way to the top of the market. And so what I did is I did something that maybe a lot with, for example, watch manufacturers, like I believe it's Cartier, do something similar, where if my memory serves me correctly, their watch is made of 2,000 pieces, and they're put together with the right type of watches by hand. And so what a lot of the communication that happens around their brand is that they communicate how much effort, how many pieces, how much effort goes into it. And it's a brand that's created on an artisan model. Now, that may be something that's the type of thing that you are able to do as well, whereby you want to make sure that you communicate how much work is going into something. So for me, an element of that was showing the kit and showing the technology. Some of it you see there is communicating my my settings. Hi, what's the white balance? Is the white balance okay? 4,500. Okay, perfect. Let's change that to 3. It was starting to get them understand that actually a lot of it was down to the equipment, but a lot of it was down to the skill and the fact that it wasn't just me. I was communicating with other team members. We had the radios. We were all talking together. This was not the type of thing that they could simply do themselves. And then what would happen is, because we were sharing behind the scenes, we would actually end up having an audience. And that audience that was following us ended up being bride and grooms that were watching what we were doing, understanding that when they came to Vivida, there was real effort and work and love that went into the process. And so that might be something that you get to utilize with what you're doing now on social media. Now, sometimes it might be simply a matter, now we're fortunate because we have mobile phones with us, right? Back then, mobile phones with good cameras was not something that we could do. But on your social media, tell that story, yes, of the actual product and what you're doing, but also make sure that what you're doing is you are communicating behind the scenes. It could be a photograph, could be a piece to camera. Share that on social media and also get that out there. I will also show you another example of a behind the scenes video. Okay. One of the things that I particularly enjoyed doing, and in fact, Rodrigo, it probably lines up with something you were saying with, you you mentioned in the comments that sometimes there can be a struggle with making content that's for you, as well as then also creating it for others. Some actually have the opposite problem. They create content that's for them, but they want to make sure that they get paid so that the dream of creating content for others. The key thing is to balance that, is to make sure that you also create content that is feeding you creatively and is encouraging clients to start to book you for the type of work that you want to do. So you can imagine when I was creating and doing wedding work, we did this by constantly advertising ourselves and our behind the scenes and creating content that was real and a very, very high production level. But over time, I wanted to start to work with larger corporations. At the very beginning, I didn't have many corporate clients. So what we started to do was to create content that really would appeal to large corporations. So I'm going to show you an example of a video that actually was a personal project for Vivida. So we knew that we wanted to do a certain type of storytelling, and at the time, as we moved into working with corporate productions, our corporate clients weren't the type of clients that would take and get us to create maybe stories on mental health or blindness or subjects that maybe I was particularly passionate about. It ended up being, at the beginning, event-based work. Why? Because the work that I was involved in doing from weddings was event-based. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to do storytelling that was event-based, but over time do less live productions and end up doing more that was like a production where we had pre-production process and we would craft a story. At the beginning, sometimes what you have to do is you have to go and create the project, even if it's for free, in line with what Rodrigo was saying. You create content that serves you, but it also needs to serve the potentially an end customer. So here what we did is we created a video on the subject of blindness. It was actually a video that Vivida 100% sponsored and funded. We did it for a charity, so it felt good to us doing that, but it enabled us to create work that we still utilize this style even to this very day. So I will hit play on that.
Yeah, I like the job actually. I like talking to people. I quite like doing the tenor announcements. Could Kevin Lyons please return to the switchboard? Could Kevin Lyons return to the switchboard? Thank you.
No, I was not born blind. I was not born blind.
My sight loss has been from when I was born.
I was born 3 months premature and lost my eyesight because I was given too much oxygen.
Too much anaesthetic.
Which triggered off macular degeneration.
The hardest thing I've had to overcome in life is sight loss. You never ever accept it, but you have to just deal with it in the best way that you can.
It's easy to sit back and say, oh, I'm blind, I can't do this, I can't see.
So here, technically, I'm using a C300 Mark II back at this stage. You know, I was now really enjoying using log profiles, and back here it was the C-Log2 that I was using. Right now, my favorite as a log curve is C-Log3. I love to have the flexibility with grading, but I don't have to do as much work in the grading as you do with C-Log2, but that's what I was using back at this time. And I really wanted a beautiful shallow depth of field when we were working all over the city, filming and telling this story. Now, we were creating this story as a charity piece, but what we ended up also doing, which was key, is again, we would start to try and see if we could create a behind the scenes or a what I'll refer to as like a case study video. So maybe it'd be helpful if I can find this now for you. And this will hopefully just give you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that we were doing. Now this may not be the edit. I'm just going to see if this is the right one. That's a different one. So what we would do is I'm going to just do case study, and I'm actually searching on another screen here. and because we are running live, there we go, right, perfect. This is an example of a video that we recorded for ourselves to present what we do, and I got in front of the camera in order to do this.
I don't know if you're like me, but I can sometimes take for granted the fact that I go to work every day. But for those who are blind, it's not something that they can ever take for granted. And we realised that when we spoke to Kevin, Ricky, Michael and Stephen, and they told us that only 20% of blind people are actually employed. And it's a shocking figure. What we started to do as we just spoke to them was we started to
Does that make sense? And what we essentially started to do was to tell the story behind the story. And then what we would end up doing is building a culture of Havida, of this honest storytelling, utilizing video. So again, that kind of DNA has moved all the way through everything we've created, whereby we became known as an organization and as a business of trying to take subjects that were really important and making them easy to understand. Now, one of the key things that is exceptionally important when you are creating and building out maybe a production company, or perhaps you are a freelancer that is documenting and using the power of video, is understand that you are solving a problem. Understand that you're solving a problem. The risk is that as you go and you film, that you simply think of yourself as a videographer, right? As an individual with a camera. And so you cheapen your offering. Instead, I realized almost by accident the value of some of the work that we were doing. Or perhaps it's the impact of the work that you're doing. So for example, if you are doing some work for a marketing manager within an organization, when you go out and you create that video, maybe it's what we call a case study video, a client testimonial. Do you know the impact of what you're creating? We did it with one client, and we ended up recording a client testimonial. And at first, I remember I said to them, they said, hey, we want you to do a case study video. And I said to them, no problem, what's the budget that you're going to work with? And I was surprised because the budget was a little bit more than I was expecting. I was thinking, how long will it take me to do it? Half a day. If I film it well, how long will it take me to edit it? Half a day. If the client comes back with some changes, how long will that take me? Half a day. And so based on the half a day's filming, based on the 1 day of editing that might be spread out over a few days, maybe a few hours here, a few hours there, that maybe I should charge this. But they were offering me the ability, and they were suggesting they would charge me this. And I was happy. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. So we filmed and we created a really good video because in true Havida style, we went all out. We had our, our steady cams or our gimbals, and we had our different lenses, and we utilized our storytelling. And then all of a sudden, they dropped the video online. And immediately I got a phone call. We want to do another one. It's like, okay, what just happened? Now, for me, I was really excited because I was used to having wedding clients, and a wedding client, well, there will be very few wedding clients that will book you twice. Now, we did have it. I had one client that got married, divorced, and then booked us again, and we did their wedding for a second time. We did one client that booked Havida. They got married. They almost got married, but they broke up in the week of the wedding. Havida still got paid, and she got married to her true love 2 years later, and so I got paid again. But this happens very, very rarely. With weddings, it shouldn't happen at all. It should be one client that utilizes your services once. And so when it comes to this company that was booking us, I was really excited. We did this job, and all of a sudden, they said yes. They posted it up a week later, and then they were coming back to me to do another project. So I started to ask a little bit more. How did the video go down? Now, I looked at the views and I was like, 100 views. We failed, right? We failed. I would post a wedding video, and the wedding video would get thousands of views. So what's the big deal when it comes to, a video that maybe only got 100 views? Well, the key thing was was that for this client, those 100 people included 10 people who were interested in buying. And those 10 people who are interested in buying, 8 of them went ahead and purchased. Now, those 8 people were big companies and corporations who were buying a multi-year contract worth tens of thousands of pounds. And I understood the power of the video that we had just created. And so now when we started to do testimonial on case study videos, we started to look at the business. We started to look at the turnover, how much money they were making per year. We started to look at the number of employees. We started to do our research on the size of the product, how expensive was the product, or how many of the products did they sell, or how expensive was the service, who are their type of clients. And then we started to understand that the value of what we were creating to the customer, it was exceptionally valuable. And what that would enable us to do is, as we would start to communicate with a client and we would start to ask them questions that would help us to either sell to a client or be able to come up to that, to get that right price point for them, we would actually be able to ask questions like, so I understand why you want to, you're interested in Vivida, which is fantastic, but if this is done in the wrong way, what would be the impact on the business? Whew. Well, we would maybe spend the money, but we wouldn't be able to use it and post it. That's okay. And what will happen if you did post it? Well, if we post it and we think it's good, but it's done in the wrong way, it will make our brand look really bad and it will damage our reputation. Also, the client that gets featured in the video, if we don't get a production company that articulates themselves in the right way, that a production company that makes our client feel really comfortable in front of the camera, well, it's going to damage that client relationship. And we've asked our client for a favor. Okay. So what you're really looking for is a client, is a company and as a team to create your video who not only has the right equipment, but has the ability to craft the right story, to present the product in the right way. Is that right? Yes. And what you need is that done so that entire story and all of those key elements come out in the space of a couple of minutes. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Not easy to do, but we're able to do that. And what you also need is you need to make sure that the crew that turns up is small enough to do the job and big enough to do the job. So that you don't want a big crew coming in with 10 people. Is that right? Yes. We need to have the right type of equipment so that there's enough equipment that the client is like, oh, this is a proper level. Yeah. Yes. And you see what I mean? See what we were doing? But we were always it's always that process of selling. So as a result, you go, no problem, we can do that for you. And the charge is this. And it's because we had started to create this perceived value. But we had also started to articulate the value to the customer because we took the time to research it, if that makes sense. If any of that resonates with you, please can you let me know in the comments. It scares me when it's silent because I start to worry that there's nobody there. So if that's helpful and resonates with you, please let me know. Also feel free if you've got more questions as well, because I would love to be able to dig into those questions for you. As you have clients and potential clients, make sure that you ask questions constantly, because from that you start to be able to craft a service that ends up being key and important to them. The other thing that I ended up doing is making sure that as we created content and we started to create videos, that we tried our best to keep ourselves restrained to specific areas. Now, the challenge that I had and the mistake that I made was trying to be all things to all people. So we did events and we did commercial storytelling for businesses. We would do case study testimonials and we would also do, and everything was thrown in. The difficulty is when you looked at the Vivida website, we were just another videography company. Right? We were another filmmaking company at the time. And the key thing for me is that we didn't want to be just a videography company. The key thing is if they start to look at services that are generalized, they start to look at other companies and they start to compare. Now, when they start to compare, they compare by portfolio, what the work is you've already done, and they may compare by price. Now, that may be challenging, particularly when you're starting off, because you might go, well, I've got 3 videos and the competition has got 100 videos. Well, how on earth do you compete? You may then have to start to compete on price. If you end up becoming more generalist, then sometimes what happens is that you end up really, your business may work on a local level because you become the local place to go to. Here in the UK, we would call it the corner shop, right? That does a little bit of everything. It's the convenience store. If you want to go and buy some food, you can buy a bit of this. If you want to buy some toiletries, you can do a bit of this. If you want, and that works sometimes. But is it possible that you find an area to focus on? So the mistake I made is I was generalist. And if I'm honest, we got some great clients and some big brands, but we didn't get enough of them, right? And then I decided to really focus on what I would call is our value proposition. And you may have heard that word and that phrase before, the value proposition. Now, I can't just be a company that offers value by recording videos for people, right? Thank you, enjoying the insight, appreciate that. I can't just be a company that's providing videos for people, because there's not really a value proposition here. Instead, we need to understand what problem we're aiming to solve. And for me, the problem isn't filming and recording your videos for events, for your corporate promotion, for your such and such, and for families and for weddings. No, that becomes very difficult. Because the difficulty there is if you were to try and do advertising or marketing, well, what do? Do you do some marketing for events and some marketing for web streaming and some marketing for this and some marketing for that? And then who's your customer? Then when you start to look at your workflow, you can't perfect your workflow because your workflow has to keep changing over and over again. So I decided to focus. And I decided that I would become very, very good at a few things. And then when we would look at our messaging, and whenever we would communicate, we will make sure that we communicate our value to the customer. So for me, what Vivida does is we are experts at taking subjects that are really complex and difficult to understand, and we make them easy to understand. We take subjects that are really boring, right? Really boring and bland, that we believe in, and we turn them into subjects that are engaging. And we take subjects that people are apathetic towards them, i.e., what I mean by that is that it's a subject that maybe you've heard over and over and over again, and you're like, oh, don't want to hear about this. We take that subject and we make it stand out. And to do that, we use immersive and interactive storytelling. Okay. And now that's refined slightly more for us. What we now do is we create the most interactive training that makes these subjects matter so that the subject sticks, and we change the behavior. Can you see though that I'm understanding that our skill is taking that complex subject and making it simple? Now what happens is a client comes to you with a problem, and they come to you with this piece of machinery that's really complex, this complex product, and everyone's scratching their head, and the business that's created it is scratching their head going, okay, we need to communicate this to customers and clients. Well, how do we do this? And you go, well, do you know something? You've come to the right place, because what we do is we have enough technical understanding. Why? Because I'm actually very technically minded, and my team is as well. And we've got the ability to break this down into a format and a way that makes it interesting and importantly engaging to people. And as a result, they'll want to buy. Oh, okay. Do you know something? We're going to work with you, not with the other video company, right? And so when you understand what your strength is, what that superpower is, you can then really, as we say here, we lean into it, right? We push into that key skill set. I'm just going to move my microphone again. Cool, perfect. I have some clips coming from Amazon, probably during the course of this particular live stream. But does that make sense? that all of a sudden now, if you understand what your value is to the customer, then you're able to do that. And maybe what you do is you work with a very specific sector. Let's say that you work with film, you create videos and filmmaking and social media for health and fitness, right? Personal trainers, gyms. The great thing is the reason why you would hire me is because, I'm making this up, I'm pretending to be you. It's because when we have someone who's involved in fitness in front of the camera, we understand what exercise they're trying to portray, and importantly, we understand when they're doing it right. And the reason is because I spend my mornings in the gym. And I understand, as someone that goes to the gym all the time, what makes a good gym great and what makes a gym bad. So as I'm filmmaking, I'm looking at all of those areas in the gym and I understand the equipment, I understand the features. Why? Because I am your client. So when I create this video for you, I'm able to do that. And so these are the types of things that when you are then starting to sell your services as a filmmaker, it really matters. This is my microphone clips. Come in. Thank you. All right. At least you know we're really live, right? So these elements, yes, become very key. The other thing is when you understand who your audience is and the type of productions that you're trying to work for, you don't try and buy every single piece of equipment for video filmmaking, right? No, you're able to really selectively look at your budget and work out what you invest in. So, for example, you may be that I know that I need to be filming these fitness instructors when they're out on the road and they're running down the street. Maybe we're going to be filming in the parks. And I know that I can't work with a big camera setup. So for me, I'm going to go for a mirrorless camera. And so the R5, the R6 would be perfect because it's lightweight. I still want that flexibility because I know the production values are really key, and being able to have C-Log 3 and be able to grade that footage is going to be really key because I'm going to be outdoors a lot and I'm going to want to be able to capture the highlights of the sky but also the shadows and the tones. So I reckon that for me, that camera is going to be ideal. Now, I'm always in control because as I'm directing the fitness instructor or the sports personality, I get to have them go again. You know, if the shot doesn't look right, okay, could you mind doing that again, but doing it from this angle? And if we go indoors from outdoors, I don't have to do it too quickly. So I probably can get away with not having internal NDs. I could just use the Canon filter in between my EF lens. Do you see what I mean? You start to then look at the equipment. It might be that you start to go, do you know, I'm actually going to do like I'm doing here. I'm going to do some live streaming. So what I would love is I need a camera, ideally that's got, you know, I want my HDMI cable coming out. I want to have more than one output. But my camera is largely going to be in the same environment and the same position. So I'm going to opt for this particular type of camera because I understand, one, what service I'm trying to do, and I understand who my customer is. I don't have to worry about having a huge rack of every camera, every lens. In fact, you know what lenses you're likely to need, all because you understand exactly who it is that you're aiming to serve. And so over time, that's what happened with me. I've gone from, when I was working with weddings, you saw that I was shooting with the 5Ds back in the day, 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, the 1DC. And then when I started to move into more of the corporate commercial side of things, I started to go for the larger camera bodies. I'm going to see if I can find you some behind the scenes as well here. I'm going into my secret stash of behind the scenes imagery, and if I do, there we go. And you'll start to see the difference in sometimes the different kit that we end up utilizing for these different productions. So if I just do this one here, I think I've got to press a button. So C300 Mark II, this is the C200. For my setups here, when I was doing the interviews and the more of the documentary style filmmaking, well, I'm using Cine Primes. I'm actually using a Cine Prime now because I love that shallow depth of field and that bokeh. And I love the way light interacts when it hits the lens. I'm also going to want to work with what I'm using here is an iDirect. An iDirect allows me to talk directly to a customer or a real everyone's a real person, but might be a celebrity, as it was here. I was filming an England freediver, and I want them to be at ease. So I'm smiling here, yes, but I'm about to, drop into a film project that I need the person to really interact on a personal level. So I knew that this was one of the things that was key, eye contact. And in fact, I prided myself with clients with being able to shoot and film face-to-face filmmaking. So it looks like the person's talking directly to the lens, but it also comes across in a very personable way. If I just give you an example of what this behind the scenes ended up looking like. So this is our behind the scenes setup. And then when it comes to getting the B-roll material that's out and about, I was particularly loving the 18-80, the compact Cine Zoom. Why? Because sometimes I want to be totally handheld, and I want the stabilization of the lens. Yeah, and that makes a big difference. I loved using the Cinema EOS because of the ND filters, and having a shallow depth of field outdoors makes a huge difference. But my camera is set up differently here to what it is when I'm literally on location. But I knew for me, my selection of my camera body, I wanted the flexibility to be able to run in both modes. So if I type in Helena, and I'm not going to play the whole video, but this will just give you an idea. You'll see the setup immediately, the straight to camera communication, and then that B-roll material as well.
It's a photo of me when I was maybe 7. I look free, I look home. I've always loved water, playing on the beach, in the waves, swimming pool, bath. I remember my dream as a child was to represent Great Britain at the Olympics. I was around 11, 12 when I first noticed that things weren't quite right. But it wasn't until I was around 26 that I realised it was depression. It crept on so stealthily that I just didn't really notice until things were going very, very wrong.
When did you first start self-harming?
So here you can see directly, right, the straight to camera look that became part of Vivida's style. At the same time, we've still got this really nice aesthetic that comes when you shoot with cinema lenses. When we went outside, you can see that the depth of field being so shallow, yeah, because I'm using ND filters, right, on the outside. So
First noticed that things weren't quite right. But it was.
So as we're filming, we're getting that beautiful depth of field. So I've chosen my camera equipment accordingly, and I've built that into the style, partly because I knew what type of stories I wanted to use or wanted to tell. For me, my favorite favorite lens, as coming as a question from Kelly, is I love the 35mm Canon Cine Prime. It's a lens that I find, in fact, I think I'm using it now. That's my favorite lens. My other favorite, I do really love the compact zooms, Cine Zooms that Canon have got. As you've seen, I've got the 18-80. It's just such an all-rounder lens. You hear things like T4 and you go, oh, T4, but I could get a 2.8 lens that might be a photographic lens. now the ability to increase the ISO up is just fantastic. So it's not really something that I worry too much about, even being in a low-key studio like this. The T4 is great. Also, that T4, bear in mind that it's a T-stop, not an F-stop. So when you have photographic lenses, they're f-stop. So what they're measuring is they are measuring the diameter, right, of the aperture, right, essentially the hole that the light goes down. And so what you find is that as you change from one lens to another, there can be a different amount of light that comes through. So there will be a very slight change in the exposure between different lenses. In fact, there'll be a very slight change in the exposure on, say, a 70 to 200 as you zoom in. Very slight. Why? Because the f-stop is measuring the hole. Whereas when you get to a t-stop on a cinema lens, what it's measuring is it's measuring the light transmission. So when it's T4, that consistency throughout the range becomes really, really key. So that's one of the reasons I love that. Just a little bit of geekery there on the technical side, just in case anyone's really interested in it. So the choice of equipment does start to play in. We have now a brand that reflects a form of excellence. Our materials and what we've been creating, yes, it's been the video you just saw was shown on RTL, sections of it. And isn't it great when you do a personal project that can end up being on TV? It was never designed to be on TV, but it was, and shown on screens, around the world. And so I want to be able to create in a way that allows there to be no limitation on where that content can go. And now what we end up doing is those little elements of understanding the client, trying to understand the problem that we're trying to solve for a customer, has meant that we now have more and more large-scale customers from the videos that we create, just because we really start to zone in. The other key thing I'd say is look to understand what it is that you enjoy doing. So I know I enjoy elements of the technical. We've gone into cybersecurity. So now we create great content that makes the subjects of cybersecurity understandable to the ordinary individual like you and me. And we use our storytelling skills to be able to do that with filmmaking, with animation, with interactivity. Why? Because I know I like the challenge of taking something complex, and I love the challenge of making it simple. When I was really into heartwarming stories and getting really personal, I really enjoy the sitting opposite someone and having a conversation with them and peeling back the layers, right, to get that real emotion, to create that story. And that was something I prided myself in. So for a time, that's where Vivida was. We were telling those hearty stories, and in fact, we still do it. So just before this session, for one large corporation, I was doing a live stream whereby the stories that we were involved in telling were related to diversity and inclusion, a really sensitive, difficult, complex subject that needs to be broken down. And to do that, we start to use storytelling. So hopefully just in our time here now, you start to understand that whether you do something like weddings, right, we focused on, yes, production values, making the most of the technology that was available to us, but we realized the importance of sharing behind the scenes. Is that something that you can do? We managed to move our pricing up, right? And the way that we managed to move that pricing up, well, it was because we really focused on, we built a little team, we chose the right type of equipment, but we were communicating the value to the customer. And then we moved into more corporate. Hopefully there were some elements there that resonated with you that you could put into practice if you're trying to find that right customer. If you're trying to find the right customer as well, literally send messages to people. If you have an idea, I did this. So during lockdown, I literally picked up the phone or I sent messages and asked for a phone call to say to them, look, I get involved with this type of technology and equipment and I do storytelling. If I was to do this, would that be the type of thing that you would be interested in? I'm not selling to you, by the way. I'm actually just interested. And tell me the truth. Like, if this is a bad idea, tell me. Okay, what would be a good idea? Okay, so if we were to do this, okay, so interesting. You're doing videos for social media. All right, and what's been working for you? Or, okay, that's not your role. Do you have someone in your team who deals specifically with the content creation for your social media? Yes. Could you introduce me? I'd love to just spend half an hour of their time. And this is what I did. And gradually over time, you then start to get the insights to the questions. Often when we're selling our services and our time to people, what we are often doing, the thing we often focus on solely is purely our creative execution. Is often a lot to do with our ability to ask the right questions of a customer. When you go into the doctors, and if you were to go into the doctors and you were literally to sit down and they said to you, what you need, okay. Headache? Yeah, cool, okay. You need some paracetamol. How does that make you feel? But if you go into the doctors and they go, hey, how you doing? Oh, you all right? If you got it looks like you're holding it. Have you got a headache? Yes. How long have you had that headache for? Okay, a few weeks. That's a long time. And what type of headache is it? Is it constant or is it throbbing? Interesting. Is there any times when that headache starts to be less than other times? Is it worse at night or in the day? Okay. All right. And you feel differently, don't you? Right? And so now if that doctor was to say, so I think what we should do is you should try this and you should try that. And then you should come back, you feel different. And it's the same process. When it starts to go into things like sales, bear that in mind as well. That if you're trying to, asking the right questions of clients puts them at ease and leaves them more willing to work with you. So thank you very much for hanging out for a time with us here. I know that we will jump over to for those of you now, and a number of you will jump onto a Teams conversation so that we can have a little bit more one-to-one engagement. But please, if you've enjoyed this video in any way, please feel free to comment once it goes live. Feel free to like if you do like it. But if you've got any final questions for now at this moment, here on this live stream, I've probably just got a couple of minutes left. I'll watch the chat box for a couple of minutes. And then see, here we go. So I've got some questions coming in here. Fantastic, keep them coming. Okay, Nicholas, what can you say anything about what makes the storytelling successful? So I think, one, preparing the story in advance. What we would do, if we were doing weddings, we would work out what story is likely to happen, and we would be on the lookout for things that would make that story more engaging. So what we would then do is we would essentially go, right, the stories are ready. We know the story. The bride's going to come, she's going to walk down the aisle, they're going to get married, they're going to have a dance, and they're going to live happily ever after. So be on the lookout for new elements of story. Is the bride running late? Is she having trouble with the dress? Can we do some research on the family beforehand? So for example, we found out that one of our brides, her wedding dress was coming from India. We actually asked her, could we come to India to film the dress being made? She said yes. She said yes. I ended up in India filming the wedding dress being made so that when she walked down the aisle, wow, everyone really understood it. In the edit starts off in India. We understood that one father of a bride, well, he was obsessed with hoovering. And so we had all these notes because we would chat with the bride and groom. We had all these notes. And when the father got out the hoover, what did we film? We filmed the father of the bride hoovering. The whole family loved it. They cracked up laughing. But we only knew that because we did our preparation before to understand the potential story elements that would come up. So even if you're on a live documentary, work out what elements of story could come up. We would research the weather beforehand. If the weather's bad, it becomes part of the story. We would check the weather forecast. In fact, we would have a team briefing before a wedding to work out on a live event, what things should we be prepared for? And we go, right, weather's going to be bad. The traffic's been terrible here, so there's a chance that the family's going to be late. Oh, that could be interesting. James, travel with the groom's party in their car and film them if they get stuck in traffic and build that into the story. And when it comes to more on the corporate side, it comes from asking questions. once again, really try to just understand what's the purpose of the story, where are they trying to get to, and what are the obstacles that they're likely to come across along the way. And those obstacles become key. Often what happens is we try to make customers just look good, right? The problem is just looking good presents no challenge whatsoever. And if there's no challenge, if there's no tension, if there's no obstacle, well, it means that there is actually, in essence, no story. So look for the challenge. You might remember that first little video clip that I showed you of me behind the scenes in the wedding. If you were to look at that behind the scenes in the wedding, you would see elements where I go, oh, the computer's crashed again. And then it was 5 minutes before it was due to go on screen. The system went down. Oh, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this company, come on, they can do it, they can do it. And then all of a sudden, we press play and the video plays out to all the guests and everyone's having a round of applause. The struggle and the tension became part of the story. So even if you're working with a company and you have a company that makes, I don't know, maybe it's a craftsman and he creates things, show that story. You know, it's been, I love what I'm doing so much, but you know, the type of wood that I craft and work with is really key. And it's been really difficult to get this wood right now because of the supply chain. But it has to be this one type of wood. All of a sudden, that tension shows the customer that the individual really cares. And when they get this item that's being carved, it's come from wood that was really difficult to source. And so that element of tension in that story is what makes it. So look out for that as well. Hopefully that's helpful. Excellent. I think Cyberphoto, we come to the end of our session here, possibly, but please make sure you follow Cyberphoto online. I am on YouTube. Look for my name, Simeon Quarry, on YouTube. The account that I'm commenting under now is actually my private Simeon account, but look out for my name on YouTube. And thank you also to Canon as well for arranging this and having me here with Cyberphoto. If any of you got any questions related to the technology, related to the cameras, I know that some will have a conversation now on the link. For those of you that are watching this like on replay, please hit up Cyberphoto. They've got excellent specialists that really understand what they're talking about. So you can understand, if you understand and you go to them and say, look, I want to be working with this particular type of client. I want to be doing live streaming because live streaming is becoming more popular, or I'm doing this type of storytelling. Even if you don't know what type of camera, what type of lens may be the correct type of thing for you, they will have that information for you. So there is a link there as well that's just been shared in the chat. It's gone live now. Please feel free to link to that. I know they also have a number of other fantastic events as well. So thank you very much. And thanks for the comments in the chat. Please feel free to share if you think that this content is going to be valuable to anybody else. And thank you to those of you who have taken the time to like on the video as well. I know that more will get the opportunity of watching this on replay. Signing out.